I just put the basics together because I thought the people interested are maybe some who are getting involved with science fair and don't really know yet what to expect and what they might see. So I've put some basic information together and a little bit of examples from my own experiences. So just starting with, well, which projects should have ethics? Well, microorganisms. When one thinks of microorganisms, I suppose one thinks of bacteria first, which makes sense. But it's really pathogen. So it could be bacteria, but it could also be some fungi that might be pathogenic. I've come across some projects who would have dealt with both. So just keeping in mind that could be any pathogens that are at the microscopic level, although most cases will probably be dealing with bacteria, but it could be fungi. I have not come across a project involving viruses, but could be as well. The bread mold, you're probably all aware of, Pylobolus, that is actually a fungus that grows on dung. And I happen to have a project for next year's fair that deals with horse dung. So this would be a consideration for that project. Then animals, including human tissues, I have not had any of those. Um, in my experience, being the chair of the regional fair here, but we do get projects regarding animals. So when it comes to animals, cephalopods, so amongst the invertebrates, cephalopods count as well under these considerations. The image that I chose here is the blue-ringed octopus, and it's just because it's a gorgeous animal. Um, they are found in the harbor of Sydney, but this is Sydney, Australia. So they're lethal to humans, so nothing to worry about around here. But for the other vertebrates, anything from fish to dogs, and just look at that face. I mean, hello. So we're talking fish, we're talking amphibians, we're talking reptiles, including birds and mammals. Uh, Theoretically, it would be all chordates, so including tunicates as well. I have not come across a project involving those, but that doesn't mean that they could not show up if the students have access to those animals. Most of the ones will probably be on mammals. So dogs, cats, hamsters, guinea pigs, horses, all of those I've come across. We've had some fish studies as well, but I don't think I've ever had a cephalopod or an octopus or cuttlefish, none of those, but they are covered. And then finally humans, and most of those will probably involve the school kids, the colleagues, their classmates of for the student who is working on the project. So those are the main um, project topics. Any project involving any of the above will require ethics approval. And why do we need it? Well, it's safety protection for the student and for anyone around them, teachers, their family, ethical treatment of animals, ethical treatment of humans, including privacy issues. And BC has quite the strict privacy laws, so that is something to keep in mind as well. So I broke it down into some considerations, things that I have come across um, over the years regarding projects that had microorganisms or humans or animals. So when it comes to microorganisms, during COVID, a lot of the projects would have sampling of what's going on doorknobs, for example. They'd swab them, which is fine. And the idea was, well, we're touching them all the time, so that's fine. Well, it is and it isn't, because what then would happen is that they would grow them up, have them in petri dishes, grow them up. And the moment you grow them up, you increase the numbers, which means you increase the numbers of the beneficial bacteria, but as well, you increase the numbers of the pathogens. So there is the issue, and there is where safety comes in. So where to keep them? Ideally, there'd be a science lab with proper safety levels and an incubator. I'm saying not in a private home on top of the refrigerator, because that happened to us, where one of our students wanted to see the efficiency, the difference in efficiency between using a bidet and using toilet paper after a bowel movement. And she was going to ask her family members to take swabs, grow up the bacteria, and see if a bidet or toilet paper was any better in cleansing. Great project, but she was going to keep the petri dishes with the cultures on top of the refrigerator in her kitchen, which is just an absolute no-no. I got in touch with I'm at the university here, got in touch with our biochem department. They had to go through occupational health and safety. And we weren't even allowed to help her in the biology department because we didn't have access to a high enough safety level. Biochem took the student under their wings, thank goodness, and looked after this. But this could have gone horribly wrong if there had been no approval requested, if the student had just gone ahead with her project and had the petri dishes with the bacteria growing on the refrigerator. Along comes someone, swipes them off, and everyone's exposed. Just not a good idea. I'm always concerned about situations or projects like that. How do you protect yourself? Well, you wear a mask, you wear gloves, and depending on the project, working in a properly ventilated area will be required. The project I have now that I mentioned earlier, they are working on horse dung, and they want to see the relationship to the change in the composition of the horse dung going along with climate change. So they're saying the drier it gets, the more sand will there be found in horse dung. She's wanting to collect them over a period of time and sift through and just determine how much sand there is, depending on where the horses are. For her, it's absolutely necessary that when she sifts through that material, that she's going to be in a ventilated area, because not only will she be exposed to potential fungal pathogens, but also sands, any particles that could be irritating to the respiratory system, anything like that should be kept in mind. And another thing that I often have come across is, how do you dispose of your cultures when the project is done? You've collected your data, you've written it up, what do you do? And more often than not, I see, well, we'll throw them in the garbage, and that is also a no-no. So ideally, if you have your petri dishes, they should be autoclaved. Not everyone may have access to an autoclave, though. In that case, pour bleach or on the dishes and dispose of them in a proper biohazard bag. That is the safe way to deal with them. Kill off the bacteria by using full strength bleach, and just have a biohazard bag once the bacteria are dead, and that'll provide you with some safety issues. When it comes to animals, it makes sense that there shouldn't be any injury, any abuse to the animals and the humans dealing with them. That's sort of intuitive what one thinks about. However, it goes beyond that. It is not just, is there any physical injury, it is, the consideration is, there should be no stress to the animals that are involved in the projects. A few years ago, not too long ago, we had a project here where the student was using her own dogs, trying to see which breed was more easily trainable. And she tried to get them to jump through hoop. One of her animals didn't comply. And so she shoved the animal through that hoop. Um, we have a vet on campus, a part of the animal care committee, and I always run um, projects where I have some questions. I always run those by her, and she nixed the project. Absolutely not allowed, because we are not supposed to have any stress on the animal. So this is a real issue, I think, where intuitively everyone knows you don't want to injure, you don't want to abuse. But if we want to comply with the Canadian Council of Animal Care, then it goes beyond that. It includes not having any stress on the animal. And that is something that I think is going to be a tricky bit to get that message out and make people aware that it goes beyond the injury and no abuse issues. When it comes to humans, same thing: no injury or abuse, no stress. But now we also have to maintain privacy. So any information that's collected, any information that contains names, any private information we have to assure the participants that their information is being kept private and they're not shared. That information isn't shared with anyone. So for Human Project, the consent forms has to be filled out, and this Sarah gave me. This is through my STEM space. I looked for it on the YSC site, could not find it anymore. YSC used to have a lot of information. I couldn't find it, but on the My STEM space site are sample forms that students who are working on a project that for which they need human participants, they can download these forms, have them filled out, have them signed by the parents and by the students, fill out the necessary information, get their consent, and collect those forms. The signed forms should be kept at a safe place. Again, it's privacy. They should be available during the fair. If a judge comes along and wants reassurance that the consent forms were filled out, they should be available, but they're not part of the project report. They are kept in a folder, in a safe place, available at the fair, but that's as far as it goes. They do not get included in any write-up for the project. Now, for the ethics approval request, this is the form we are using, which is based on the form that the Science Fair Foundation has used for the last couple of years, and it deals with humans, with animals, with the tissues, with microorganisms. People can just fill in the information, circle what is applicable to them, and provide the information that is asked for. Whether it's for humans, it tells you up top. Get the signatures that you need, chordates and or cephalopods, and microorganisms, and then submit those, request the approval. When they are approved, some fairs have an ethics committee. In others, it may be the chair. It'll get signed. It'll get dated, and the project's good to go. And there's more for that. Now, I thought you might be interested in seeing some of the examples that we've come across here. So some of the things you might see, this is from an actual form that the student filled out. And as you can see, it is just beautiful, well researched, well phrased. Just an example. You might see this. You might see something that's maybe not quite as elaborate. You might see something like this. It has no risk. Done. No, nothing further there. Or you might see something like this. Um, all different levels will be submitted, and you've got to work through and see, is there information missing? When there is, then what I would do is send my list with a request where more information is needed. When that was answered, when my questions were answered, then on the actual form, right below where they submit their signatures, the teachers, the supervisors, the students, I would put in, okay, this is additional information provided by the participants. I'm happy with this. This is information that was needed. Now we have it. I sign it. We're good. For others, I would add a little comment here. So this was one where it was just the request was submitted too late. It doesn't make any sense to carry out the project, then request the approval for the ethics. Shouldn't be. So I can't help myself. I put this in the notes here. This should have been requested beforehand. I'm letting it go. It was low risk, but just for next year, it is worth more to me to get the information out. So those who are involved in a project this year maybe didn't do it quite right. Next year, they'll know. The more we can get that information out, the more we can get people, students, teachers, parents informed, the better. I've had projects that I had to turn down where both the teacher, the student, and the parent signed off on our registration form. We are saying, does your project involve humans, microorganisms, animals? And if it does, fill out the appropriate pages here. And they have to sign off that they've read the pertinent information. And both the teacher as well as the parents would just sign, and I have to go by this. I have to believe that when they sign, they actually read it. But turned out neither the parent nor the teacher actually read up on it, neither fully understood and appreciated just how serious the issue is. And we ended up not allowing the project or the student to participate in the fair. So it can be quite serious. So the more we can get the information out, the better. When should this approval be requested and the request be approved? Before the project even starts. They should never start a project that requires ethics approval without having gotten that approval. So get the word out in the fall if you can. Around here, we've had info sessions in the fall where we invited teachers, students, parents, and ethics and the considerations was always one of the issues that we brought up. Just get the information out. But have that information posted year round on your website. We can no longer count on YSC to provide that information. We need to take responsibility and make sure that the forms are available, the information is out there on each region's, East Fair's website. And then when should be approved. I put it in blue, before the project commences, not after. It doesn't make sense. And around here, we have a deadline for submissions of the request. So if we have usually our fairs are the beginning of April. Our deadline to submit the requests for approval are around mid-February. We are saying, if you haven't submitted your request yet, we cannot get the approved and signed form back to you in time for you to do this project properly. So have a deadline that tells them you need to think about it, you need to submit your request so we can look at it, we can iron out any issues that there might be, we can approve it, and you should still have enough time to do that project. I've had several requests for next year's fair already. I've approved a project already for next year. So the sooner this gets done, the better. And that is the last bit I wanted to talk about. Is everyone on board with what I was trying to get across?
Yay! Thank you, Rossi.
You're most welcome. I try to keep it to just the basics, to just highlight some of the issues that people may come across, and just some of the points that one ought to be aware of. And just, it is important. This could be potentially really dangerous for people, if you're not taking proper care, if you're dealing with microorganisms, with pathogens. You want to make sure you treat the animals properly and appropriately, and for humans, privacy. Obviously, proper treatment, ethical treatments of humans. We had a project a few years ago where the student worked on a Kevlar vest for police, um, that was to protect the policeman. And he worked on it, worked on the filling, would wear the wet vest while his dad beat on him with a baseball bat. Never asked for approval, shows up at the fair. It wasn't clear what he'd done in the project report, or I would have clued in. And here he is, there's the baseball bat on display. And he quite happily announced that his dad beat him up with a bat. Obviously, should never have happened. So things can come out of left field, really. Not
Yeah, I
funny,
know.
I
Yeah,
know.
I know. I've had the pleasure of working with Rossi for the last 2 years, I think, on the provincial ethics committee, and I have learned a lot. There are a lot of things that I wouldn't have thought about at all, but now I'm much more aware of. We actually had a project in our Youth Innovation Showcase that's happening right now that raised several ethics flags for us. So it's something I learned from you. I'm very happy to say we will be starting the ethics committee, the provincial ethics committee again this year. We're just gearing up, getting all of our ducks in a row. So we'll start announcing that and getting more information out
Yeah.
in, I think,
I must
early.
I must say that the last couple years I was part of that ethics committee, and that was marvelous because we could help one another out. I'm very comfortable when it comes to project with microorganisms or animals. With humans, not so much, because the YSC rules also have changed. It used to be they could be fed, participants could be fed. Then it's, well, no, because what about allergy? What about any medical issues? What about people with Crohn's disease, with um, whatever condition they may have? What about caffeinated drinks? So for a while, we didn't have any feeding or drinking any samples. Now they seem to ease up on this a bit. I'm always very happy if I'm part of a committee where someone is comfortable dealing with human projects, frankly. I'm good with animals and microorganisms, but the human ones, ooh, not so much. So having that support where if you haven't done any of these, here's the committee, send in your questions and we'll help one another. That is just community building that I really appreciate, that we can all lean on one another and work on this together, share the workload. It's been absolutely marvelous, and I really am happy that the Science Foundation Fair Foundation has started this. So kudos, it's absolutely great.
Thanks, Rossi. For anyone who doesn't know, it's a committee where anyone is invited. You can have all of your ethical approval forms sent to one place. As a group, we'll go over it and do the approvals and send back the information to the students. So it's open to anybody who wants to join. And it's just like Rossi said, it's a way to sort of share the load and also learn from each other, and also make ethical standards standardized across the province and in accordance with Youth Science Canada's standards. Because any student does move forward to Canada-wide, at least they know they'll be approved because it's based on Canada-wide standards. So that's that.
A few years ago, we had a project here that would have been selected to go to the Canada wide, but they hadn't gotten the proper approval ahead of time. It was working on fish. That the project involved fish, and that student couldn't go because they hadn't followed the proper procedures. They hadn't gotten the approval. They used drugs, to which they exposed the fish. Absolute no. You have to get that approved. I'm lucky. We are lucky here because we have a vet on campus, and I can contact her, and she's been absolutely marvelous in supporting the fair and supporting any projects that I send along her way if I have any questions. For example, there was a project where they wanted to deter deer. You probably all are faced with the same issue, that you grow anything in your garden that deer like, they will go yummy snack and they disappear. So what they were doing in their projects, they put out their plants in pots and would paint quote unquote, with hot sauce. And they wanted to see if, because the deer could approach or not, if any of the treatments that they painted onto their, I forget the plant's mums, I think, would they deter the deer? And I thought, wow, do we have to be concerned about this? Sounded harmless enough to me. I sent it to the vet, and sure enough, she said, there are bylaws in place here where you are not allowed to feed the wildlife. You cannot have a project like this. I was concerned because what about hot sauce, deer? What, how will they react? This was about bylaws, but all I'm trying to say is it's good to have a number of different heads coming from different backgrounds that can look at requests and just go, this is an issue, this is an issue, this is fine. So it's really nice to be able to rely on one another.